Leadership is taking people on a journey where there's a vision, guidance and purpose.
Good leaders lead with the heart as well as the head.
Leadership means doing the right thing for the right reason, no matter how difficult it might be.
You're listening to Leadership Unwrapped, a podcast where you will hear from people who are living leadership every day. Hi everyone, super excited today. Our guest is Catherine McNamara. We're old friends and we've known each other a very long time. We've had a long professional journey together, so I'm super delighted that Catherine has said yes and that she'll talk to us, because I think you're going to find what she has to say really interesting. Catherine works as Deputy Head Teacher in Midlands Prison in Portlaoise. She's been a keen advocate for the promotion of health in prisons, having researched and published in this field, and her work is definitely worth checking out. As well as holding an incredibly busy role, Catherine also teaches history and sociology, and she's deeply passionate about supporting her students' learning. She's a very proud Limerick woman, and us Kerry people will not hold that against her for our conversation today. So you're super welcome.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And here I am in this corner filled with, I'd say, healthy self-doubt. That's what we're going to do. But yeah, sure. Look, it's all part of the journey.
Yes, so are we, if that's any consolation.
Absolutely. A cup of tea will solve everything. Let's just have our tea and chat. So thank you so much for being here. I'm going to start by just telling our listeners that I've known you since about 2006, and we've worked together, we've researched together, we've thought together, and I have always been blown away by your integrity, your deep belief in what you do, your huge support for your students, and your passionate advocacy for them always. I come away from every time I speak to you inspired. So I just want to start from that place and say how wonderful it is that our listeners are going to hear a little bit of that today.
Thank you very much. Okay,
so maybe start by telling us how you got into this role. How did you end up teaching in Portlaoise?
So I suppose the long and the short of it is that I applied for a job, and I don't mean that in any sort of a flippant way. I didn't realise when I applied for the job that the job was in the Midlands prison. And I think I remember reading the advertisement and it just said teacher of history and sociology for maternity leave. And while I knew it probably wasn't, a secondary school, I knew it was probably some sort of alternative education environment. I did not realise that it was the prison. I actually didn't realise that it was a job in the prison I was going for until I was actually going for the job, going for the interview for the job, I should say. And that was, I went for the interview full of, hope and I'm just qualified and I'm going to change the world with my new methodologies. And I was thankfully successful. So I started in 2004. And I haven't looked back. And I think the interesting thing is that when I started, I was covering for maternity leave, and these things you're kind of thinking, oh, short term, I'm not really going to embed myself or whatever. And actually, from the time I started there, I absolutely loved everything about the job. I just thought of it as a job in education, teaching subjects that I love. And then I suppose that maternity leave turned into probably another maternity leave, and then turned into a contract, and here I am 18 years later. And I probably wouldn't change any of it. I don't ever see myself doing anything different or wanting to do anything different.
Yeah. You started with a degree in UL in history and sociology?
Yeah, so my degree in history and sociology, I absolutely loved doing that degree. And thankfully I had very supportive parents as well who just were like, yeah, sure, just do something that you love doing. And I always loved history. I taught history to myself for the Leaving Cert. I'm just totally nerd out on you here for a few minutes, but I taught history to myself for the Leaving Cert just because of the school I went to. There actually wasn't a history class.
Wow. Okay.
And I just loved it, and I can't explain why. I just did. But when I got to UL and I took sociology, it was just something that I became so passionate about, right? And I had some great lecturers. Some of them are still in UL. Some of them have passed on now. And, I suppose just thinking back on those times and that sort of level of learning and how much it prepared me for the job that I do now. And I just think in everything that I've done, having that background in sociology has really been of benefit to me.
And then you went on and did a HDip. What was that like?
So, yeah, I suppose you get to sort of fourth year And you're there going, God, what am I going to be? Because I think we're all expected to be something or to choose, you know. And then I thought, okay, while my parents have always been extremely supportive of all of my endeavours, I probably wanted to be something so that they'd calm down a little bit as well. And back then, you know, it was really competitive, actually, the application process for the HDip. It was actually quite difficult to get into. And myself and a friend of mine, actually, from my degree course in UL, we both applied, we were both successful. So off I went. And yeah, I suppose I had thought about it. I thought that it was something I would love to do because I actually loved history so much and loved sociology. And I suppose I didn't want to let that be known, you know. I was just like, sure, I'll just do this year and we'll see how it goes. And actually, when I did the HDip, I hated every minute of it. Which, that's not to say that I don't love what I love what I do. And there was aspects of it that I did like. I liked, do you know, actually, looking back now, the most important thing that I learned from doing the HDip was about professionalism and the professionalism that's attached to the job of teaching.
Okay.
And it's how I try to lead now as well. I suppose we might get back to that later, but yeah, I really didn't like the structure of the HDip. I didn't like being in big lecture halls with hundreds of people in them is not for me. It's not how I like to learn. I suppose there I was. And again, my long-suffering parents had, you know, paid the fees. They were paying for me to stay away from home and that kind of thing. And here I was going, oh God, what am I going to be now? Because I just, I don't know, I didn't enjoy it as a year, and I felt it was really something that I had to get through to get on to the next phase. And I suppose when I finished the HDip, I, again, like everyone does, I was just looking for jobs, and I stumbled across the history and the sociology teaching job. And I said, you know what, Catherine, if you get to teach sociology, just what a privilege. Yeah. And, you know, you'll get to do something that you genuinely love, hopefully. And I suppose I'm lucky enough that that's the way that it's turned out.
Yeah. But you took to teaching like a duck to water then, once you started. So the HDip had one type of experience that was about the learning, but the teaching was something different for you. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, and I think it's very difficult to actually fully prepare anybody for that. And I think definitely with, you know, newly qualified teachers or whatever, there is no amount of classroom teaching or lecturing or whatever that can actually fully prepare them for the responsibility of being in the classroom on your own, because it is a huge responsibility. I mean, I teach adults, and I always have, but I think from junior infants right up to whatever age adult or whatever that you're teaching, the responsibility of being the teacher is huge.
Yeah. And did you find that daunting then, as a newly qualified teacher, coming in and teaching people that I assume would be older than you for the most part?
Yes, I did. Some of them were similar age to me, some of them were a good bit older. And here I was from my very nicely comfortable middle class-ish upbringing, where I had, you know, the opportunity of good schools and the opportunity of third level education, lovely supportive parents and family, and just sort of, you know, going into the prison setting, which is essentially the opposite of that. And many of the people that I meet every day have experienced marginalisation and social exclusion, and their path in education hasn't been straightforward, and they haven't had the positive experiences that I've had with education. So I think that was always really evident to me from day one. And I think when I talk about the responsibility of teaching, no matter what age, I think there's a greater responsibility attached to people who have had such negative experiences with education in the past. And I really feel that in my core, you know, that it's one of those, it's the kind of job where, like, the people that I teach deserve the best of me, and they deserve the highest standard of education that I can give them. Because I don't know, I've been thinking about it, I've had many years to think about it. I do think that maybe for the first time in many people's lives, education in prison provides people with a level playing field. It might be their first experience of equality in the education system. And I think then again, when I talk about the responsibility of teaching, that's really what I'm talking about. So you can have people that had just real negative experiences, did not enjoy school for any number of reasons, and you find them in your classroom. And basically all I wanted to do, and all I still want to do, is make the experience a positive one for them, meet them at the level of engagement that they're at, and see if we can't help something to grow.
Yeah. You always speak about, in your role, needing to have a natural curiosity about people and needing to like people. You've always said that's a very important part of being an educator in the prison setting. Do you want to chat to that a bit?
Yeah, so I suppose it goes back to maybe, I attribute it to my background in sociology, really, about having that curiosity about people, about groups, about how society works, about how we all sort of are here, but we're all muddling along together, and we're all sort of in our own little world, but actually we're in the world together. If that makes
it does.
Confused sense. And I really think I feel this for teaching in a general way as well, that you have to like people, right? Like, I think it's going to be a struggle for you if you don't like people, if you don't like being in that arena. So I think wanting to know what makes people tick, and wanting to be involved at that level, because I think sometimes, in the classroom, and we're very busy, we're working towards a goal or whatever, any kind of conversations can actually emerge, and I think it's to sort of want to get to know people, want to know what makes them tick, because I think ultimately that feeds into how people learn as well. I think sometimes our ideas around how people learn and the structure of our education system is very prescriptive, and I think it's really important to make space for different styles of learning. But in order to tap into that, I think you have to want to know people.
Yeah, one of the things that's always struck me over my career of teaching is when I've worked with not a lot of teachers like this, but some every now and again, who really don't like kids or don't like teaching that much. And I've always felt that for the children in those classrooms, there's something really wrong in that atmosphere, because you pick it up. It's, it just goes into your skin. You just absorb it when somebody isn't really present with you or doesn't really like what they're doing. And I just can't bend my head around why people do that work when they don't feel connected to it. And it's the wrong place to be for me, I would think. So
I agree with you completely. I think probably one of the most important parts of our job is that connection, right? And having, again, sort of wanting to be around people, and sometimes, right, you're tired, you've got stuff going on, whatever, like, oh my god, I literally cannot have another conversation. But actually, to, I suppose, give of yourself, right, to give your time, to give your empathy, and to give your kindness. I think that's sort of our superpower as teachers, really, and just to be able to do that. I think that's so important.
I think as well, before I met you, you could have the assumption that do your students want to learn? But you have never doubted for a second that your students want to learn. And you seem to be very met with enthusiastic people who want to volunteer, who want to do things, who want to broaden their horizons. Did that surprise you?
No, it didn't surprise me. And again, I suppose my first day, I remember my first day really clearly. I remember what I was wearing, like, and probably put a lot of thought into that. But no, I was struck by how vibrant the school was, right? And I suppose there was part of me that didn't really know what to expect. And I think that now I'm very conscious with new teachers as well, of just sort of how do you explain this to them, right? Because it's probably different than the idea that people have in their heads. And I suppose, I think as well, in a general way, there may be people listening to this, and to speak about education and the positivity of education in prisons can be quite jarring for people, right? Because I think without any form of judgment, if your attitude to crime and punishment is sort of lock them up and throw away the key and just hope for the best, like you're probably not going to be in tune with what I have to say about it, and that's fine. But I suppose, again, I will go back to what I said previously. I think when you, in whatever setting, when you teach people that have experienced marginalisation, and social exclusion, again, you have to be on top of your game, and they deserve the best, right? And I think the reason that they deserve like the highest standard of education that you can afford them is because generally in their lives they haven't had the opportunity to sort of, I suppose, increase their social capital or their human capital or whatever. They haven't had people to advocate for them. They haven't had the connection that we know as teachers is so important. They've never been able to have the experience of somebody displaying empathy towards them. And any of those things, like even the trusting kind of rapport that you can develop in the classroom. And I think that that's why it's so important. So their interest in education is not surprising to me, you know. Probably, if anything does surprise me, it's how much they want to take it all in, right? And it's like, even not to put limits on them, because there really doesn't have to be limits with education, but I think it's more to slow the pace down. You don't have to do it all now. And I think that's probably the surprising thing about the job, is how much that they would actually want to do and how much you can do with them.
We had a conversation with Nicky Blum a few weeks ago. He was talking about empathy, and it's resonating really well with what you were saying. And he talked about empathy not only being about the heart, that connection, but also that intellectual piece, that curiosity about the other and learning about the other. And he bound them together in a way that I hadn't heard somebody talk about before, and you're kind of saying the same thing, which I find really interesting.
Yeah, and I think it's important for us as teachers to actually be able to tap into that. Like, it's okay to really love your job, and it's okay to want to do your job with a whole lot of yourself, right? And I mean, it's also okay if that's not what you want to do, that's fine. But for me, I know that I would struggle greatly if I had to be anybody other than myself. Yeah. And I think that it's important, I suppose, you know, I've probably heard previous contributors to your podcast say like, you know, you can only be yourself and all of this, but I think to be yourself, you have to know who you are. And I think there's like a piece around that deep reflective work that you need to do as well, just to really get at what are my core values, what do I value, what do I want to impart in the classroom, and what kind of a space do I want this to be other than a learning environment.
I think it's more important now more than ever, with just all the societal change that's happening around us, even how ideologies are changing, to have that sense of what our own values are, that they're your anchor. You make your decisions from those, yet we gloss over that a bit too much, too quickly.
I think as well, when like we talk about knowing each other and having that space for reflection, I think it's important to note as well that it's okay that that's not something you can just do once and you have all the answers. Do you know, like, depending on the experiences that you have in life, the jobs that you work at, all those different things are going to impact that. And I think it's also okay to acknowledge that, right, I have spent some time actively reflecting on who I am and the values I bring to the classroom, but it's okay if that changes next year or even next month, as long as you continue to bring your full self with you, as you've said there.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think as well, maybe that it's something, definitely in my experience of the HDip, which was many years ago, and I know that things have changed now. There was never an emphasis on like knowing who you are and knowing the kind of teacher that you want to be. There was never that emphasis there. Yeah. So I suppose most of that work has come for me through just like postgraduate studies and other things that I've done since, you know. And I suppose that's what I suppose I really, when I'm thinking about education, I'm thinking always about what am I bringing to the table here, you know, and am I staying true to myself and true to my own values.
So can we move on to health promotion? Because you love it. I just need to start by saying that. I think health in prisons can be very contested. It can be a bit of a flashpoint for some of the reasons you mentioned earlier. Some people would have a view we shouldn't be investing in that, you know, it's an incarceration piece. Others would have the view similar to your own, that there haven't always been the same opportunity for health and for health gain from people that actually are now in prison. So you've been very strong in your writing about making that case and using that voice. What drives you to be interested in this piece for your work?
So when I found health promotion, was when we met Patricia. You might have had a small part to play in it, but so it was back in 2006, and I suppose the first thing I want to say is it had been a time of huge personal sort of turmoil for me, and just experiencing just a very devastating loss. And I do what I always do, which is I turn to education, because I just think helps you to, I suppose, focus your attentions on other things. So when I started learning, or when I started on the HDip in health promotion in UL in 2006, as I've said, and like immediately I loved it. I think it's the sociology background as well. I think you have to bring all of your curiosity and your wanting to know about people and about life and about structures and how things work. And how things change and how change is a process, and I just love the whole thing. And I suppose then I distinctly remember the day when I figured out that I was really passionate about health in prisons. So that's probably like, sometime in 2007, and I've taken it from there. And I think that health and education are inextricably linked, actually, and everything that I've spoken about in relation to education can be applied to health in prisons as well, because you bring your values, you bring your whole self to it, and you really are interested in fostering some kind of change, be that small scale, or on a bigger scale as well, if the possibilities are there. I suppose the way I look at it is, and you're right, I do love health promotion, love everything about it, and I've never compartmentalized, like as a teacher or as somebody that's interested in health promotion. Like, now is our health promotion hour. This is the time when we talk about health, right? So from the time that I discovered health promotion and health education, I've kind of woven that into who I am as a teacher and who I am as in the classroom. I refer to history and sociology always as the talky subjects. So I mean, when you're talking about life and you're talking about people and you're talking about society, issues are going to emerge. And I suppose what health promotion has given me is the grounding and being able to, I suppose, trust myself to discuss those issues, right? And know that I don't have all the answers, but I can at least start the conversation. So I suppose, like, inspired by really that model around brief interventions or whatever, which is used around smoking cessation and things like that. When I see, or if I've ever encountered an opportunity in the classroom where I can have a conversation that might be around health, or might be around somebody contemplating making some kind of change, how can I encourage that, and how can I still, get the work done in school, but also be there to sort of support in another way. There is a pastoral element to our job, definitely. And I would never be the kind of girl that would shy away from a good, healthy conversation about health or health promotion, And I suppose that's who I am as a teacher, right? That's who I am actually as a person, We should have these conversations. Education is transformative, and part of that transformation is transforming your whole being, and that can, I suppose, be your physical health, your emotional health, anything like that. And I suppose that led me then into the research work. And again, like, prisons are not easy places to conduct research at times. There's certain, organisational barriers that I encountered. But on the whole, a very positive experience. I had just the depth and the quality of the information from research respondents. I was doing my research with staff members, and I suppose that was sort of just indicative of the good work that's going on in there, and how willing people are to sort of see things change and change for the better, I think as well that, sometimes working in prisons, right, is considered low visibility work. And actually, when I came to that phrase, I was kind of struck by it, right, because I think there's something really sad about it, the idea of the work that you do with your whole heart, that you commit to every single day, the career that you've chosen, be it a prison educator or a prison officer or whatever it might be, but that's the kind of job that really you can't talk about, and that maybe people don't want to talk about, for obvious reasons, and for reasons that I've alluded to already. And actually how I came to put words around that concept, right, like I've always thought it, and I just never had the words for it. But I actually I was doing a piece of research a few years ago. I was just writing about, I think, leadership and reflection and vicarious trauma and sort of just things like that I've, that kind of I was on that buzz at the time. And I read a piece of research that a former prison governor had done, that he was kind enough to share with me. he described it as that sort of as low visibility work. And when I read that, I was like, yeah, that's actually what I've been wanting to say. And I think maybe there's a huge amount of positive, good work happening in prisons all over the country every day. But I suppose it's hard to get the positive out there. And I think as well, part of that low visibility work then for yourself working in the environment, you have to be really conscious then of the emotion work that comes with it as well. I think it's really important in leadership. I think it's important as a teacher to just understand sort of that schools are emotional places, prisons are highly emotional places. And I think to be yourself though, there's that sort of nearly emotional dissonance piece as well that you have to be aware of. So I suppose what's expected of you and who you are, let's say by the organisation, right? And how you should behave versus sort of who you actually are. And there's maybe a little bit of a disconnect between the two at times. So I think once just to be aware of the emotions that exist in it is an emotional job. You know, I think the hardest part of the job for me is the emotion work that I have to do around it, you know, and being aware of that as well. It challenges you. Definitely in the past it's really challenged my resilience. You know, I spoke about my parents and just the massive support that they have been to me my entire life. My dad is now deceased, but I know that I had his 100% support all of the time. But again, I was able to, they were great mentors, my parents were really, you know, and I was able to model resilience, I suppose, from them, you know, because they were two really resilient people, but just some challenges that they had down through the years. I think there was a time when I suppose I wasn't reflecting maybe on myself. I was just in there doing the teaching, you know, and I wasn't reflecting, I wasn't thinking about it, but I could feel my resilience resources kind of dropping, you know. And that's when I really started to have a conversation with myself about how I was feeling, and was it the job or was it other issues that were going on or whatever. And I think the challenge then with around your own resilience and realising that maybe you're not as resilient as you were is really like changing but staying the same, I suppose, is the idea of it, isn't it? That you know that you have to make small changes to make things more manageable for yourself, but also at your heart you want to be that same person that you always were. So I think you know, I suppose prisons can be quite difficult environments, you know. But I think again, it's okay to actually be yourself, and I think be there with your whole heart and your whole self. I think that's the important thing.
I guess all that takes time too, though, doesn't it? Because when you are newly qualified, whatever job it is, you're starting a new job and you have all of these challenges coming at you for just trying to find your feet and figure out a routine. It's easy to kind of put all your time into that, and then I suppose it does take time for you to say, hang on a minute, is everything aligning here? Am I who I want to be within this role? But I think it's understandable too that doesn't always happen straight away.
Oh no, I totally agree, and definitely I'm sure there might be people that will listen to this and think that I have time for nothing else because I'm so busy thinking about myself.
I doubt that.
But, no, I think I completely agree with you, and I think when you're newly qualified, it's all I have to go in and I have to make an impression, and I need to be on all these, you know, committees, and I need to be involved in this and I need to be involved in that, and you know, I want to be the doer because, you know, ultimately I love this job, but I also want a contract. And I think you know, there's that kind of element to the job, but I think all teaching is hard. I think teaching nowadays is really hard.
I agree.
I think to acknowledge that the COVID-19 pandemic has changed the landscape of education in Ireland utterly, I think it's really important to acknowledge that. So I think in terms of, you know, reflecting and looking at oneself and trying to figure out who you are, and how you teach within that, I think it's really important, but I also think it's okay to take the breaks off and actually give yourself a little bit of a break and not be so hard on yourself. You know, there's probably a time and a place for everything. I'm lucky that with the postgraduate work that I've done, with the research work that I've done, with the mentors that I've had in my personal and professional life, I'm lucky that I've actually been afforded the space to be able to do that properly and to understand the benefit of it, because I think it has actually improved who I am as a teacher. Yeah,
and having that skill of reflection is a skill in itself, isn't it? I think it's one of those things that it can be developed, And then it's, as you say, there can be kind of times and places along the way then that you can draw on that. Yeah. But that's, I suppose, the biggest thing is carving that space out for yourself and learning how to kind of do it properly, I suppose. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think, I spoke about professionalism before, and sort of it was probably the biggest learning I gained from the HDip. But I think to be able to, what reflection and what being able to look at yourself, your role, your decisions, what that actually does for you is it kind of provides you with a professional self-understanding, right? But also a kind of a personal self-trust, I think, as well. And for me, when you get to the point where, as you're saying, Eva, like it is really a skill. But when you get to the point where you're able to sort of reflect as you go along, so while you're in it, you're reflecting, I think when you get to that point, that to me, sort of like the epitome of professionalism, really, that your decisions are aligning with your values and you're confident around those as well. And I suppose, definitely in my teaching work in the prisons, and as you know, I've done a small bit of teaching at third level as well, I would always use reflection as an assessment mechanism, right? Because I think we very often don't know how to do it because we don't give ourselves the time to stop and do it and to really get in touch with ourselves and our feelings and our values and all that good core work that we need to do. And I don't think it's a skill that you can necessarily teach people. I definitely think that you can encourage it and maybe model it and demonstrate it. But I think it's so necessary for all teachers nowadays.
And I think one of the pieces around reflection is that people often dismiss it as, you just, you reflect, you think about what happened and you say, okay, I'll do that differently the next time, and you move on. But meaningful reflection, where you're actually saying, am I keeping with my values here? Is this integrity when I made that decision? Should I have made that decision? And if the answer is no, having the courage to go back and say, actually, we need to go back and revisit that one, because on reflection, I think, that's what it really means to me. It's not just simply I just think about what I did and I lightly think, I can do that better, and I move on. But it actually, I connect it with, okay, these are the pieces that drive my decision making. This is how I want to be in the world. These are my values. Was that in keeping with that? Yeah. And the reality is we're human beings. It's not always. So we have to be open to the good as well as the areas of improvement. We won't call them bad things, but we'll say areas of improvement. When we get it wrong, we get it wrong as much as we get it right. We're human beings, I think. That's the piece to think about.
I think it just really requires honesty as well, doesn't it? Because if you are asked to reflect for the purpose of, an assignment or something like that, or even if you're trying to build that practice within your daily or weekly practice of teaching, I think it can be easy to just pinpoint something that you kind of notice straight away and say, yeah, maybe I'll do that differently next time. But it's about really being honest with yourself about your values and the needs of those within your classroom, and then evaluating and being able to say to yourself, yeah, I did do something wrong there and I do need to rectify it for the next time. So I think that's what's really important about it.
Or even just being able to read in a student's eyes. You can read when you're talking to somebody, when you say something and it jars. And just to be able to be confident enough to just go in and figure out why it's jarring, being able to, so that's the reflection in action piece that you've talked about, that you just become aware of it and you say, okay, I need to look at that. I need to think about that, because I have a worry that we have almost like, McDonald's reflection in initial teacher education. It's like everything is reflection. You reflect on every lesson plan. You reflect on every class you teach. You reflect. And I think it's putting people off. So there's a piece where we need to reclaim that more meaningful piece, because it's what sustains us in our work and stops us getting burnt out. And
I agree with that.
It's just my thing.
I agree with you. And I think that the first time I would ever have been really encouraged and pushed to reflect was doing the graduate diploma in health promotion. And you were always such a keen advocate of it. And there were days, there was a small group of us, but it was such a lovely group. It was such a positive experience from start to finish. But there was days that were difficult because you really had to go into the inner workings of yourself and pull it out and be able to even verbalize that, So it's not an easy thing to do. And I do agree that putting a little label on it and go, okay, no more so than now is the time for the health, now is the time for the reflection. No. It doesn't work, but I think what we could possibly encourage in teacher education would be just an openness to exploration of it. I think that's probably I think my thinking on it anyway, you know, that just be open to it, because like me, you could find out that like it's the thing that you want to do because you want to get in touch with yourself. And I mean, I have to say, like, I'm not an accidental leader, right? Like I don't perceive that I am. I didn't fall into this job by accident. I actively wanted it. I worked really hard to get it. I filled out the application form. I filled out many application forms, but actually when you're filling out those forms and they are lengthy, you have to kind of really tap into what is important to you about education. And I suppose having the ability then to be able to reflect on oneself was probably crucial for me to be able to make the step into a leadership role in the school.
When you talk about not being an accidental leader, like we choose this, it's sometimes we want it, but we don't always think about the implications of wanting it, and we're in it, and then we think, okay, I've got it now, what do I do with this? So, but you often talk about coming at it then with a whole person, with a whole heart, and being really present. And do you want to say a little bit about that? Because you've talked a good bit about that in the past.
Yeah, I mean, as I've said, right, I wanted the job. I worked really hard for it, and like anybody else, you know, I've had disappointments. I've had things that haven't quite worked out for me, and you kind of have to pick yourself up a little bit, because that really gets at your nearly shame or your self-blame sort of inner, you're terrible at everything kind of, you know, self-talk that we all probably engage in from time to time. And I suppose this time, I worked really hard. I really wanted the role. I felt I was ready for it. I had spent many years with an AP2 post or whatever, so I suppose I had been in and around sort of, you know, the leadership workings of the school or whatever. So I really focused a lot of my attention on getting it. And like when I got it, then that was great. And I suppose I had done that, you know, from my background in sociology, I sort of knew about the anticipatory socialization piece of it, of like, who will I be when I get this job, you know? And actually, probably as in most cases, and like you've alluded to, Patricia, it turns out to be sort of vastly different to what you might have perceived. And all of these little things that I had in my head that I was going to do and I was going to implement, like I've probably done about 2% of them by now. But that's okay, right? Because it's all part of the journey. And I suppose as well, there's sort of a slight luxury for me being the deputy head, because I have a very strong head teacher to support me that I can fall back on. There's a 3-person kind of senior leadership team in our school, and they are vastly more experienced than me, and I enjoy that, right? So I can have my little, as I refer to it, like my adventure in self-growth here, you know, because I know that like at the moment the buck does not stop with me, you know, so it's kind of great to have that support and to have that sort of mentoring relationship with them as well. But yeah, I think wanting it and getting it are two very different things, right? But also approaching it with being yourself and really having that deep understanding that yourself is good enough, you know, knowing yourself, being able to be yourself, but also being able to tap into the values. I could not be in that setting and be anybody other than myself. It would be too hard for me. So everybody that knows me knows I'm a real heart on my sleeve kind of a girl anyway, you know, and if anything good can come from the pandemic, it's the wearing of face masks for me, because you can only see my eyes, like it kind of hides a multitude, because everything is always written on my face. Generally, it's probably I've been told it's one of my worst flaws, but I don't feel it as a flaw.
No, I think probably it's one of the things that makes people feel safe too, because you know where you stand with somebody, and I think there's something really important in that.
Yeah, I mean, to me, right, my view on prison education is it's transformative, right? Like I'll hang my hat on that one. That's fine, right? And how I go about doing it, it's fine. It's the same as being in every other school, right? But to know myself, the one thing that is so important to me is integrity. And I suppose integrity, saying it is one thing, but actually being able to do it and to teach that way and be able to lead that way as well, I think is really important. I think in your core, doing the right thing when nobody is looking, and it goes back to the low visibility piece of the work as well. Nobody is looking, Nobody wants to look maybe at times either, but knowing that you're really striving to do what is right when literally nobody out there really cares whether you do the right thing or not. And that might sound negative, and I don't mean it to be negative. Like, prison education is extremely important. There's, you know, over 250 extremely dedicated prison educators in this country, but we do work in a space where I think we're probably marginalised ourselves in terms of mainstream education, right? And that integrity piece then is so important to me. I think it's so important to model that for our students as well. And that when people are talking to you or asking you for something or whatever, that they know that you are going to actually do the right thing. And I think then when you get to that point where you're, again, I've probably said it previously, but when your decisions align with your values, like, that's professionalism to you know.
Yeah. So if I were to ask you, and I mean, this is a curveball question, but so now working in this setting and knowing that some of your students, you know, their access to education prior to this wasn't optimal, or maybe their experiences in education weren't optimal either, and that's the reality. What would you say to teachers? Is there any one gem or pearl of wisdom that you think you could say now that you are in a different setting in education but doing the same work? What would you say?
That is a curveball.
I know, sorry. It just hit me, but I just thought, oh my God, it's just a great opportunity.
Yeah, okay, so I suppose there's a couple of things I would say. In the first instance, I would say be open to it, right? And I think the second thing I would say is that just, and it's like, goes back to the old saying, like, never judge a book by its cover. Yeah. Right? Because, you know, we do this, we're naturally judgmental, like we're people in the world, like that's what happens. We have all of our norms and our values and our little intricacies or whatever. But I think it's important to meet people where they're at and accept them for who they are. And I think for me, the crucial thing is in prison education, but probably in education in general, is to just stay open to people, right? And to probably give of yourself, because when you give of yourself, you get copious amounts in return.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a fantastic insight and maybe a good place to stop our chat. I just want to again say, and I think all our listeners are going to hear this from you, it's your passion, your belief, your value system, how you are in the world. It's just such a privilege to know you. And I think the prison education system is very blessed to have you in their ranks. So I look forward to chatting to you again soon.
Thank you, Patricia, and thank you, Niamh.